Well, in today's gospel, we see Jesus directly and forcefully freeing people from their demons, as it were. That has me recall an encounter I had as a divinity student many years ago now. Part of an alcoholism education and counseling course I took involved visiting a number of different alcohol rehab programs and observing various 12-step open meetings. At one outpatient facility, I arrived a bit early and sat in the waiting room. I struck up a conversation with the only other person in the waiting room, a young woman who, by all appearances, had been through a rough time. She was calm and cordial. After a while, the counselor came in, introduced himself, and explained to the young woman that I was there to observe, if she didn't mind. She nodded okay. But in his presence, the young woman's demeanor changed visibly. She was now looking quite nervous and agitated. Once in the counselor's office, while both were still standing with a chart in his hand, he said straight out, "So, you're an alcoholic." He named the disease, the unclean spirit, the demon, as it were, quite directly and forcefully. And if you name a demon specifically, expect it to shout back. The young woman went on a rant and looked very scared at the same time. The counselor did not let up. By the end of the session, the woman who had been remanded by the court to this clinic had begun to come face to face with her demon, her disease, that had just been directly confronted. A demon, or daimon in the original Greek, was thought of in ancient Greek mythology as a supernatural being of a nature somewhere between gods and humans, including the soul or ghost of the dead. A kind of attendant, ministering, or indwelling spirit that could guide and warn a person. However, in the Bible, demons were thought of in mostly negative terms, as adversarial existences, both personal and societal in dimension, hostile to human well-being and rebellious against God, evil influences or spirits. These demons or unclean spirits were considered evil because they separate us from God and from our true nature, our Christ nature, if you will, and therefore cause us suffering. In the worldview of that time, they were subsumed under the prince of demons, the devil, Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebul, what have you. These demons or evil spirits were also called unclean because their effect was to separate the afflicted person from the community of faith and worship of God. In our day, this use of biblical language about demons, evil or unclean spirits, is regarded appropriately as picture thinking. That is, as a figurative way of expressing the reality and extent of evil in the world, existing not only within us, but also around us, and thus with influence upon individuals, groups, and whole societies. Therefore, such unclean and evil spirits can manifest both as addictions and obsessions, traumas and dysfunctions, affecting individuals and their immediate circles, and also manifest as larger evils that exist within but are also greater than one's own capacity to make things go wrong. Evil and unclean and contagious spirits, like the spirit of a gang or an angry mob, or say the spirit of materialism or militarism, xenophobia or nativism, misogyny or homophobia, hyper-partisanship, and so on. Principalities and powers is the phrase St. Paul used to describe these larger evils. And leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. also used this language of the principalities and powers when, for example, describing the evils of racism. Not in any way to diminish the responsibility of or to deny the complicity of racists, but rather to point to the pernicious racism and enmity that infects the majority culture, and all humanity for that matter. And like Jesus, who spoke and acted as one having authority, so too did Dr. King, directly and forcefully, and he had to get as specific as naming and calling out, for example, Sheriff Bull Connor and his fire hoses, dogs, and deputies. And their demons lashed back, we remember. And so the personal challenges that that young woman in the alcohol rehab clinic had to face, and our society at large has to face again and again, and especially now, these are challenges to confront unclean and evil spirits, the principalities and powers, first in our own hearts and minds, and then in our wider world. Again, first in our own hearts and minds. For our demons rarely arise from totally outside of ourselves, as St. Augustine put it. Now, anyone who has engaged seriously and long enough with oneself in counseling or 12-step recovery knows there's a difference between, on the one hand, finding out you have demons, that relatively toxic mix of traumas, obsessions, and dysfunctions that have shaped the decisions and course of your life, and on the other hand, truly addressing and becoming free of them, or keeping them at bay. My own demons of workaholism up until my recent retirement, and obsessive worry that continues even into the present, are just two that I care to name at the moment in public. There's a world of difference, though, between naming them and actually exorcising them, as it were. The exorcising for us is most often a lifelong process, often never completed, rather than some sudden release, as we read in our gospel today. Some people are satisfied to know what their demons are, but stop there, having a bit of self-knowledge, but not engaging in the hard work of change. Because if your demons are truly cast out, so to speak, whether suddenly or through a long process, you have to change. And if you change, others may change. Whether it's unlucky circumstances, dysfunctional parents, hanging around with the wrong crowd, or some other outside forces that are the source of our demons, or whether they're of our own making. Once we've stopped denying we have them, then at best we feel foolish letting them continue to guide the choices and behaviors we make. But at worst, we feel trapped and stuck in our dysfunctional ways and are too afraid to risk any other way of being. As Sally Kempton put it, quote, "It's hard to fight an enemy who has outposts in your own head." As a former colleague, Elizabeth Garnsey, points out, at least our demons are familiar. "I've come this far, haven't I?" we rationalize. "I'm too old or too far gone or too stuck to change. It's too late to become someone new. I'll lose that relationship or have to change my job, or worse, stay in this one and have to confront the problems. I'll have to sever a destructive tie or make a new commitment. I'll have to do something I've never done before. I don't have the energy to reinvent myself," we might think. And starting over is too terrifying. Now recall, in a similar encounter later in Mark's gospel, Jesus has the demons leave a man and enter a herd of pigs, who then run down a steep bank and drown in a lake. But as Garnsey points out, the difference between pigs and humans, if we look at that story, is that the pigs, when possessed by demons, self-destruct. But we humans, with our resilient souls, assimilate, even normalize our demons. We incorporate them into our lives and cope with them. We too may be self-destructive, but in our sophisticated ways, we manage to survive. But only a pessimist or a cynic would cling to the idea that mere survival is the goal of life. There's so much more to life than mere survival. We're created with a capacity to live abundantly. And Jesus came to show us how to be free from the pull of our demons, including the very familiar demon of demonizing others. And he came to show us how to turn and change and become fully who we are meant to be. We might identify our problems, but can we change our patterns of behavior? Going halfway is to stop short, naming our demons, but not letting go of them. But God asks us to go all the way. And yes, that takes a lifetime to work through. So let us find out what our demons are. Let us learn their names. And let the living God help us and our world break free of them. Amen.